Good evening, everyone, and welcome along to our Foróige Career Coaching Clinic webinar focusing on careers in law. This career coaching webinar is an exciting initiative created by Foróige to provide young people with an opportunity to learn about careers and professions that they may be considering. Foróige is the leading youth organisation engaging 1 in 10 young people across Ireland. Foróige encourages young people to take responsibility for themselves and to be part of shaping the world around them. You can get involved through your local club, or you can avail of one of the many programmes Foróige offers, like Leadership, Nifty, and the Be Healthy, Be Happy programme. If you'd like to find out more, please visit www.foróige.ie. With us tonight for our law webinar, we are joined by Denise Kerwin, James Crane, and Sinead Kenny. This evening's webinar will be a mixture of speakers and interviews. Each panelist will share their professional story, and after each person has spoken, you will have an opportunity for questions. You will notice along the bottom of your screen, there is an opportunity to open the Q&A feature. We strongly encourage all attendees to use this feature and to get involved. At the end of the webinar, we will be running an evaluation poll. It will take less than a minute, and we would really appreciate everyone taking the time to complete it. So, first up tonight, we have Denise Kerwin. Denise completed a BA European Studies with the University of Limerick and qualified as a solicitor in 1994, being appointed as a partner in CKT Solicitors in Cork in 2014. Denise, you're very welcome tonight, and thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jim. So good evening, everybody. I hope you're all doing okay. As Jim said, I qualified as a solicitor in 1994. I didn't necessarily grow up thinking I wanted to become one, but I did sort of have a certain grow, I suppose, for particular subjects in school that I was attracted to. So I always liked English, I always liked reading, and I was very interested in art and still am to this day, but just don't get to practice much these days. I grew up, I suppose, in a rural part of County Waterford. I was the youngest of quite a large family, and nobody else in my family had gone to college. So it was very much a new thing for us, and I certainly was very much encouraged and supported by my family in that, which I'm very, very grateful for. But I certainly, how would I say, all of my family had either gone into farming, nursing, the bank, very traditional, I suppose, roles. And certainly by the time my turn came around, I was very clear in my own mind that I wanted to do something very, very different. So in terms of the subjects I chose in 6th year, 5th year for senior cycle, to be honest with you, I chose the subjects that I was good at. I didn't necessarily choose subjects with a career in law in mind. And thankfully, I did well in the subjects that I was good at, and I got the points I needed to go to UL. And the course I chose was actually not a degree in law, but it started out, it was European Studies, was the name of the course. And I think it suited me well because it gave me, in first year, you did a whole range of subjects, really interesting subjects like history, sociology, anthropology. You had to keep a language, so you chose either French or German. And also, I suppose it gave you then the option at the end of first year to choose a particular stream. And I chose the law and French stream of the course from there on in. I liked college. I think it suited me. I didn't necessarily like each year, and I never particularly liked exams and when it came to exam year, but I certainly loved college life. I really embraced the opportunity to live away from home for the first time. I was very lucky. I made friendships that I've sustained to this day, even though we've all drifted in and out of each other's lives over the years. So I liked my course. The other reason I liked what I did was because there was work experience, or what we used to call co-op or work experience, built into the course. Now, I think these days, if you do many of the courses they do in UL, they do one block of work experience. We had 2 shorter blocks of work experience over the 4-year degree. And one of the first proper jobs I had was working for what was called Bord Fáilte at the time. So that's Tourism Ireland, I think they call themselves now. And I was working on my first work experience in O'Connell Street in Dublin, which again was great fun. It was incredibly busy. You were in a large, busy office. You were very, very junior. Again, I was really looked after and mentored by older staff in the office. And that kind of led in then fortuitously. My second piece of work experience was actually a stage abroad, and I got to go to Paris and study at the Sorbonne for 6 months. And while I was over there, I also got a job with Bord Fáilte, but this time on Boulevard Madeleine in Paris. And that was, looking back at it, one of the best experiences. My French probably has faded into non-existence, but I still look back with great fondness on that time. And again, was very lucky. The people I worked with were always very supportive, and probably covered up a lot of my mistakes because my French wasn't probably as good as it needed to be. But again, a great experience if you do have a chance to choose a course that allows you to do a stage abroad. It's a fabulous experience to live in another European country, to learn about the culture, you know, to see the fabulous kind of museums, galleries, all of the sort of features of those big old European cities. So that was my first job. When I when I finished my degree in 1990, would you believe it, UL gained university status that year. And this allowed my degree to be recognised as a law degree. And it opened up the opportunity to go to study in Blackhall. And being honest with you, I would say the majority of the people on my course in UL chose to do Blackhall, to do the course there and qualify as solicitors. Also at that stage, the rules were slightly different, and we didn't have to do the very onerous FE1s or entrance exams that you know, graduates need to do these days. So once we got in, again, it was, I really loved being in Dublin for the 2 parts of the course that I needed to attend for. And I did an apprenticeship, stayed in Limerick and did my apprenticeship there. In terms of one of the questions on the sheet for us speakers tonight is, what was our worst job? And it seems very ungrateful now to describe it as my worst job, but certainly when I qualified, the firm I was working for in Limerick decided to set up a small satellite office in, I won't say which rural town, but in a rural town in County Tipperary. And I think I found that year very difficult because I was on my own in a very country based office, and I found it quite isolating, and I was used to being in an office where there were lots of people around me, and I certainly don't look back on that year as being one of the highlights. I found that year quite difficult, and also I suppose I'm talking about 93, 94, jobs were very, very hard to come by. So at the time I was very grateful to have a job, but looking back on it, it wasn't one that suited me. I didn't like the idea of being on my own or being a sole practitioner, let's say. So in terms of the kind of skills that are useful, if you decide you're interested in law, or you're interested in talking to your career guidance counsellor about it, I'm sitting here in my office in Cork, and I suppose what you can't see is that I'm surrounded by paper. And often people, and I'm sure some of the speakers that will follow me, can't understand why solicitors are so paper dependent. We're still very tied to legal proceedings needing to be served by hand or by post or by paper. So yeah, I'm surrounded by a lot of files, and you need to have patience and a certain degree of endurance that you don't mind reading lots and lots of paperwork, because it does require a certain amount of diligence and patience working your way through documents and reports that you need to know in order to present your client's case in court. So good patience, good communication skills are very important, because on a daily basis I'm communicating with other lawyers, other solicitors. I also go to court. I spend a lot of my working week attending court. So you need to have good communication skills in terms of being able to advocate on behalf of your client, present evidence on behalf of your client. And I have to say that is one of the parts of my job that I probably enjoy the most. It's going to court. Now, not all the time. There's certain days where you're waking up and you're dreading the day ahead, and you know you have a really difficult, horrible case that you can't wait for the day to be over. And I suppose one of the things I've had to learn over the years is how to manage all the worry and anxiety about those difficult working days. And what I've kind of developed a strategy. I try to visualize the end of the day, and I know that it's going to be over at some point in time. These difficult days don't last forever, and I visualize myself driving home from work that evening and try to kind of push through and plow on as best you can. In terms of my career now, as Jim mentioned, I was made a partner in CKT Solicitors in 2011. And we currently have in the region of 30 solicitors employed. So by Irish standards, we're probably a large, medium-sized firm. Lots of solicitors that I meet in my daily practice would be operating in much smaller offices. And then you have a lot of what they call the larger kind of firms, usually most of them based out of Dublin. So you have a whole range of kind of very different workplaces that you can end up in. I like the size of the firm I'm in. I've been here now for almost 24 years, I think it is. So I've been with the firm as it's grown and expanded. And it's nice to have been on that journey. I still bump into people sometimes in the corridor, and I'm not sure what their names are, but I just keep saying hi and hope for the best that they'll eventually, I'll figure it out. So that's one of the challenges, I suppose, as your workplace becomes larger, is trying to keep on track with who you're working with and keeping in touch with other colleagues in other departments. So as you would probably guess from this size of office, we have different specialities and different departments. So we have a conveyancing department, a defence litigation department. Conveyancing is the buying and selling of property. Defence litigation is essentially defending litigation against insurance companies or state agencies. And then we have a healthcare department, and that's part of where I work. And I do find that area of law very, very interesting. How do I organize my time? I see this question as a suggested topic. Probably I'm quite good at organizing my time. I also have a fabulous, we have great support staff here. We have legal executives and secretarial staff who help us maintain our diary, make sure we're not clashing too much. I do have days where unfortunately it feels like 10 things are coming at you at the same time. And that requires, I suppose, you just need to step back and say to yourself, I'll tackle one thing at a time, starting with the most urgent and working my way down. But, you know, there have been days where you would feel a little bit overwhelmed. But again, just start one step at a time. In terms of my greatest weakness, again, one of the questions suggested, I suppose I still tend to take criticism a little bit personally, or if things don't go your way and a decision in court doesn't quite suit you, I still tend to take that to heart a little bit. And I think it's going to be something I will be working on for the rest of my working life. And the best advice I can give people is to try to manage that. Try to, if things don't go well for you on a given day at work, try to reach out and have a chat with somebody who understands what you do and understands what went wrong and can maybe chat to you about that and unpack it all and try to make sense of it. I think once you can talk to a colleague or someone that you work with, it helps you to kind of work through all of that. In terms of goals for myself, I'm very bad at goal setting. It seems to be quite a kind of a, you know, perhaps a more modern thing. It didn't really sort of exist as I was coming through the system. I've tended to kind of go where life has taken me and go with the flow. And opportunities will come and disappointments will come as well. And it's again about recognizing the right opportunity for you and taking advice from people whose advice you value. The industry has changed an awful lot since I started. Although I said we're very paper dependent, we've become increasingly less paper dependent. And during 2020, we found ourselves going online a little bit. So courts are doing some cases online, which has been really challenging, but I think we've kind of adapted. And I suppose it's pushed the profession forward a little bit. It's kind of forced people to modernize their approach to work. So oddly enough, I think the COVID-19 restrictions and so forth have opened up other opportunities in terms of modernizing how we go about our work. How do I motivate, you know, within the team here, there's probably 6 solicitors and we all work together in this particular department. We meet nowadays online on MS Teams about once a week. We chat to each other about sort of developments and something that might have happened in court that could impact on all of us. We share our experiences, good, bad, and indifferent. And sometimes we have a good old rant, usually about maybe a particular judge or an outcome in a case that you were really dissatisfied about. And that's important too. It's quite cathartic, I think, to sort of, you know, come back and analyze something and maybe just give out that sometimes it was just the wrong decision. And what are we going to do about it now? Am I coming to the end of my slot? So please.
No, Denise, you're not. Actually, there's loads of questions in here for you. So we said we better ask you to answer a few of these.
Absolutely.
Emer, you mentioned it earlier, Denise, about a lot of paper and a lot of reading. But Emer has the question: was there a lot of reading involved in studying law?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. And, you know, certainly when you go to Blackwell Place in Dublin, which is where solicitors are trained, so this is after your degree, that's all gone online. But in my day, you physically went to Dublin, you relocated up there for, you know, 6 months and I think 3 months were the duration. And yeah, it was fairly intense. You know, you got a lot of lectures, a lot of tutorials, and some very, very difficult exams periodically. So yes, unfortunately, there is quite a lot of study. And if you don't find it interesting, you're going to struggle with that. So, you know, you really have to, there has to be some aspect of law, not all aspects. I never liked conveyancing. I never liked tax. I was never interested in wills and probate, but I was always interested in litigation and the advocacy involved in standing in a courtroom and presenting your case. So there has to be one element of all of that that interests you, and that will motivate you even to, you know, to study the subjects that aren't close to your heart, because you want to get through and you want to get to practice in the area of law that really suits you and interests you.
Brilliant, Denise. Denise, in from Zach, is the entrance process for Blackhall similar to King's Inns, i.e. only recognise law degrees if not, you have to do diploma of law?
Now, I'm actually going to pass on that question, and maybe James is better positioned to deal with it because I am now 26 years out of the system.
Yeah.
So to be fair, it was quite different in my day, and I know that they've reconfigured how you do the course, when you sit exams and so forth. So maybe tag that question and maybe James would be much better positioned to answer it.
No problem. Is there security in a job as a criminal lawyer?
Most of the criminal lawyers I know are, you really need to be on top of your game. I think the people who are really good do well, because a lot of them would be getting clients from the criminal legal aid system. Now, it doesn't necessarily pay large amounts of money to represent a client through the criminal legal aid scheme. But if you have enough cases, if you have a high volume of cases, you can make a very comfortable living from it. But you must be good on your feet. Some of the best ones I know, I love watching them because they're so good at what they do. But there is a handful, even here in Cork, that are up there. And then there's a lot of other people who are trying to break into that scene, but it tends to be dominated by a handful of the best. But there's no reason why you can't aim to be one of the best. The guys I'm thinking of won't last forever. They will retire, and we need new people coming along, again, making a good reputation for yourself.
Yeah, you see the same names popping up for high-profile cases.
Yes.
You mentioned doing work experience. How could we go about getting work experience if we are interested? Jerry wants to know.
Okay, so I suppose last year and this year were very difficult for people. I know that in our office we would normally take in a handful of TY students, but last year and this year we haven't been able to, because we've had to keep the physical number of people in the office quite low, so as to ensure, you know, that we're compliant with our COVID-19 restrictions and that everybody is safe in the workplace. So let's fast forward maybe to, I won't say this summer because it would be a little bit optimistic, but for those of you maybe that are starting TY and will be looking for work experience, I would reach out to any of the local solicitors that are in your area and ask them if they would take you in for a couple of weeks to do work experience. Now, bear in mind, that doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be doing anything terribly exciting, but you will get to see how offices work and how, you know, how things flow during the course of the day. You might be doing a lot of photocopying. You might be doing a lot of what we call hand deliveries, bringing documents and, you know, filing documents in the court offices and things like that. But that's all really important so that you can see how offices work and operate. The other tip I would give people, and I did this myself, is to go on the courts.ie website and look up the locations of the district courts throughout the country. Find out what day, for example, they deal with crime, And, you know, plonk yourself into the courtroom if you can. At 10:30 in the morning is usually the time that business starts in the district courts. And provided, again, all of the cases on the day, you won't be allowed to sit into family law cases. Those are all private proceedings, so they're dealt with in private, and no members of the public are allowed to observe. But you can sit into the district courts when they're sitting locally, and watch how the criminal list is managed by the judge. Watch how the Garda inspector presents evidence and cases on behalf of the state. Watch the witnesses give evidence. This was always something that I loved doing when I was, 18, 19 or whatever. And I can't recommend it enough. The other thing to watch out for, particularly if you are interested in crime, and I'm not pushing crime, I'm just saying they are the cases that they will allow the public in to observe, is that the criminal trials would take place as well from time to time in the circuit courts across the country. And it could be really interesting to sit into some of those longer criminal trials, and again, watch how a jury is brought together, how evidence is kind of adduced by barristers in those cases, watching somebody cross-examine a witness. If you're interested in that, you're free to attend. Now, again, I would be talking more so, I suppose, about the beginning of next year onwards, because a lot of our courts have been very restricted in terms of who they will allow in. So at the moment, they're really only allowing people in who have business in court. They're not going to be allowing in members of the public. So I'm talking maybe end of this year, beginning of next year. Go on to courts.ie, find out where your local district court is sitting, on what day, and get yourself settled in at the back and just watch what's going on. It's a great insight into how the courts are dealing with difficulties in your own community as well, because it's a great snapshot of maybe issues or problems that are arising within your own community. So it can be very, very interesting.
Denise, there is 24 questions in the Q&A box. I'm going to ask you one more, but maybe you can have a look at it yourself. You might be able to answer a few off screen later. But what is the difference between a solicitor and a barrister?
Well, as the years have gone by, Jim, less and less differences, would you believe? So we train in two different bodies. So solicitors train in Blackhall, which is, operated by the Law Society. And then barristers train at King's Inn, which is another big building in Dublin, not too far away from Blackhall Place. So traditionally, I suppose, with your law degree, you have chosen one or other stream. Solicitors do a lot of the day-to-day operational work around, as I said, conveyancing, buying and selling property, assisting people who might want to litigate or sue, either defending them and so forth. Barristers tend to do most of the advocacy. So this means that in certain higher courts in particular, and I'm talking about Circuit Court, High Court and Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, the higher courts, usually you will have barristers representing a client. And usually what happens is the solicitor meets with the client, learns everything they need to know about the case, deals with the paperwork, and then briefs the barrister to do the advocacy piece. So I suppose the higher up through the court structure you go, the more money that or expense or the more serious the issue might be, most solicitors will instruct a barrister to deal with the advocacy in the higher courts. Now, the rules were changed over the years. There's been a kind of a chipping away at the differences between the two professions. A lot of people who qualify as solicitors go back and requalify. They have a kind of a shortcut to requalify as barristers. And I actually worked with a guy who qualified as a barrister and then went back and trained as a solicitor. So you don't have to do all of the training. They can do a kind of a shorter version of the courses. And also, I suppose the rules were changed to allow solicitors to appear in the High Court and to represent clients. And, whereas before, I suppose things were a little bit more restrictive and only barristers were allowed to advocate in the superior courts or the higher courts. Nowadays, solicitors can do that. So it's probably the best way to describe it is that barristers are more involved in advocacy. And then certain barristers would specialize in very particular areas where they might issue, advices or opinions to a solicitor to help them guide the client as to where best to go forward. But there's a lot more movement now and switching over between the two professions.
Denise, thank you so much. You're very informative about it. I nearly want to go into law myself now after this.
Don't.
Thank you so much. And Denise will be here at the end of the speakers to ask to answer more questions. But as it is, there's 23 questions there, Denise. You might have a look in and see the answers of them. Okay, thank you, Denise. Next up tonight to speak, we have James Crane. James graduated with a BA degree in economics, politics and law with DCU. James now works as a trainee solicitor working in a rural solicitor's office. Bernie, I'm going to invite you to interview James. You're very welcome here tonight, James.
Thanks a million, Jim. Hi, James. Thanks a million for coming along with us tonight. So maybe just as a start, James, you might give us a little bit of background, like where you're from, where you went to school, and then where you went on to college from there.
Yeah, I'm from Wexford, a small town called Bunclody. I went to school in the FCJ secondary school here in Bunclody, and I subsequently went to DCU to study economics, politics and law. And I picked that degree, I suppose, because it sounded good at the time to me, not necessarily because I had much of an interest in anything really when I was that age. Well, I did, I suppose. I had an interest in it, but I wasn't sure what career path at all I wanted to take. That sounded like it would open a lot of doors to me. And in fairness, it was a very good degree that way. People that studied with me have gone into all branches of different types of career. Some are in law, some are in every other type of work. So it was very beneficial in that sense, yeah.
Okay, so you had sort of maybe three strands, and so then after you finished your degree, what happened next?
So when I eventually got to the end of my degree after 4 years, I was kind of at a crossroads. I hadn't necessarily, I suppose, put a lot of proper thought into a career in law. It was only when I was probably 22 or 3. When I was finishing that I decided a career in law was what I wanted to do. And at that stage, I suppose in a way I was slightly behind a lot of the other legal graduates. Most people, no, it's not the only way, that's why I'm stressing it. A lot of people would, from the minute they get into college in a law degree, fast track a career in law through doing internships and summer internships in offices and getting experience in-house that way. And it's definitely beneficial if you know that you want to be a solicitor or work in that side of in a solicitor's office, but I didn't. And so when I finished college, the FE1s, which are the entrance exams into the Law Society, were completely alien to me. And I was very unaware of the work that it involved and the level of commitment. Denise touched on the exams in Blackhall, and she kind of touched the FE1s were introduced I think about 20 years ago as an entrance exam subsequent to your college degree to become a solicitor. And I found them very difficult because I had essentially breezed through my leaving cert and breezed through college without really understanding the work or commitment it took to become a solicitor. And that's, I'm not saying that to try and put anybody off. I think it's probably just the most important aspect I found on my career path to date is developing a work ethic, especially in education, working hard at your exams and studying, because that didn't come naturally to me at all. I struggled big time, yeah.
And would you say, you know, was it the studying aspect of it, or were they actually difficult exams, or was the content difficult, or what actual part would you say? Or was it the whole lot together?
It was both, really. As I said, like the Leaving Cert and the college experience were, I won't say easy, but I was interested in what I was doing, and kind of just passing the exams and getting on with things. I wouldn't say I was ever that ambitious in my exams, so just passing them and moving on. At that stage in my life was all I was focused on. But when I got to the FE1s, I kind of hit a brick wall and realized that, like, you know, breezing through that side of things just wasn't going to work anymore. So I found the content was difficult. It's very detailed, and they're I won't say restrictively hard. They're very toughly marked, and they're very well laid out in, I suppose, separating people who really want to be solicitors, the people who think it might be a career for them. You won't pass the FE1s if you actually don't have a grow, I suppose, for law, or a complete interest in it. And again, I'm not trying to scare anybody off at all by saying it. I just,
no, and I mean, this is what this is about. It's to give people, I suppose, who might be thinking about going down the road, what's ahead of them. But is it all like law-related materials that's in those exams?
It is, yeah. They are, so they're separated into 8 different categories, 8 different sort of branches of law. And as Denise was saying, like, you'll have more interest in some parts than others. I loved the criminal aspect. I liked conveyancing, the property side of it. The probate aspect of it, I love it, and I still love it. But then the business law, equity is another sort of a obtuse branch of law as well. I found those aspects tough, but as Denise was saying, if you like 5 or 6 sort of branches of it, you can push your way through the other 2 just to get yourself over the line.
Okay, great. So you got through those exams and you proceeded into Blackhall. So what does that entail when you get there?
Unfortunately, I didn't get to attend Blackhall. My class were the first class based on Zoom, so I think that might be a sort of a career highlight missed out on, apparently. But Blackhall, I'm working as a trainee solicitor now, and I found Blackhall, it's been very, very beneficial to me in my day-to-day career now. I'm only starting out as a trainee solicitor, but everything that I've studied is very, very relevant to what I'm doing now. Sometimes the initial stages of law can be very, because law is so broad, you kind of scratch the surface as to what an aspect of law, any type of branch of law might be. But I found that the Blackhall experience to be very, very focused on the day-to-day life of a solicitor, and every day I refer back to my courses, and I definitely learned an awful lot. Yeah, and it was comforting because I know a few solicitors outside of my sort of working life, and even when I had passed my FE1s and I was speaking to them, I found that maybe I was missing a trick a bit, that I wasn't qualified enough. But going to Blackhall definitely sort of streamlined the education system, they streamlined the knowledge that you need to become a solicitor, and it definitely kind of took away those fears. So if anybody is worried that they might never get to the education level or knowledge level required, it will come.
Okay. So as a trainee solicitor, what do you do, James?
I'm lucky. I'm in a smaller practice in Bunclody here in County Wexford, and it's rural in the sense that a solicitor, we kind of have to be a one type of solicitor for everything. We do conveyancing, litigation, probate, a small bit of company law, family law, criminal district court level stuff. So everything can arrive at your door, which I find some people mightn't like that, because in a way you end up doing 5 or 6 different jobs in one. But I must say I love it. It's very broad. It's very engaging with people in your locality, and it's very rewarding. And again, I'm only starting out, but I must say I find it very, very rewarding. Yeah.
And are you shadowing another solicitor, or do you do some piece of work by yourself?
No, I'm shadowing a solicitor, so my tutor, for want of a better word, would engage me in different files, different cases that might come into the office, and at this stage of my career, we're working through them together. He's showing me the ropes, what to do, just guiding me along. Any questions that I have, he'd help me along the way, I suppose.
And was it difficult for you to get into that solicitor's practice to do your apprenticeship? I know some questions that we got in beforehand, there was questions around that, like, can it be hard if you're not from, say, a legal family or have contacts? Can it be hard to get an apprenticeship?
It can be hard, yeah. It can be very hard for people. I suppose, to separate it crudely, there's two sort of distinct workplace environments for trainee solicitors. There's the commercial side, which I think Sinead might speak later on about. She would have attended a commercial practice, and then they take in large numbers of commercial solicitors. And then there's the rural side of it, which take in probably a smaller fraction of the trainee solicitors every year, and they are like, there's smaller numbers, and it is difficult to get into. Speaking to colleagues on my Blackhall course, the number one thing I found was that perseverance would have been key. And an awful lot of them found that relationships that they developed outside of like handing in CVs or looking for jobs, like a lot of them would have met their future employees through word of mouth from working in a different area. So it's a recommendation from another employer. So what I'm trying to say is that they were kind of rewarded for their diligence in other areas where they've worked. You know, but it is difficult, yeah. But perseverance is key.
Yeah.
And Blackhall do a lot of help in finding them.
Oh, well, that's great. So I'm just looking at the Q&A that's coming in here. One young person wants to know, what's your typical day like, or is there such a thing as a typical day in the life of a solicitor or a trainee solicitor?
Life of a trainee solicitor, going in and expecting to not know what you're supposed to know is something I find every day, and it can be scary. But I suppose life as a trainee solicitor, organising yourself will be the number one thing I find to be the most important, because, as I said, in the firm I'm in at the minute, anything and everything can arrive on your desk, and because it's a small team, you're expected to help out, probably maybe more so than bigger firms, I'm not sure, but it just means that it can be hectic at times. So to be honest, there's no sort of schedule for every day. Take work as it comes. I make lists and I go in the morning and I try and tick them off as I go along, and I think it's probably a habit everybody could do for every stage of their life, to be honest. Certainly have.
Do you get to go to court at all?
I haven't yet, purely because of the COVID side of it.
Okay.
Hopefully in the next few months I'll start attending much this year.
Okay. You might just, there's a few questions here that have come in around subject choice, James. Was there any subject that helped you would think in living cert years, that helped you with law, or for your specific course in DCU, was there any entry courses that you had to do? I see a few people have asked here about business. Would it be necessary to do business? So maybe you might just give us an insight on that.
Yeah, I didn't do business. I studied economics in secondary school. It would help being comfortable with speaking and being comfortable with reading. So probably the history, English, economics, business, they would be, I suppose, your classic subjects that would suit a solicitor. But no, I found that just having a broad knowledge of everything in Anthem is as useful as anything else.
Okay, right. I think something Denise said, there's a lot of reading.
There is quite a lot of reading, and I am probably, no disrespect to the younger generation, and I find do a lot of stuff sort of online, you know, over my phone, and I'd be used to dealing that way. But I was shocked when I went in with, you know, the paper that is still required. Yeah, it's a very high level of physical paper, which I wouldn't have been used to.
Yeah. I suppose just before we finish up with you, James, are you glad you made the choice you've made?
Absolutely, yeah, I loved it. I had spent quite a number of years when I was doing my FE1s in different careers, and looking back, I'm very sort of regretful that I didn't start earlier. I suppose I spent 3 or 4 years working in procurement and sort of just the office jobs without sort of realizing what I wanted to do. And now I feel like I've definitely found a career that I am completely happy with. It's very rewarding, and yeah, I'm delighted, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, great. And you just back, just a question, you just hopped in here. In relation to those tests that you mentioned, those FA1s, is it?
Yeah.
Is that something you can learn for, like, as in, are there books that you study, or is it like aptitude, or is it a mixture of both?
The FE1s, they're a strange test for students in school to understand the way they work, in the sense that there is no place of study that you attend before you do these exams. The Law Society sets a syllabus, and there are past exams and many different resources you can use to learn, but there is actually no set
curriculum.
No, there is no curriculum. That was very challenging, and it is something that if you're really interested in becoming a solicitor, it's something you should probably spend the most time, I would say, just understanding the FE1s and organizing yourself around them, because personally speaking, I found them definitely the most challenging aspect of it so far.
Okay, great. Well, James, thanks a million for all of that. There might be a few in the Q&A, very direct questions that you might have a look at, and we'll come back to the main panel again to ask some of the more broad questions. So thanks for that, and I'll hand you back over to Jim.
Thank you, James. Our final speaker of the night is Sinead Kenny. Sinead has a bachelor's degree in law from the University of Limerick. Sinead began her career with Madison's and then moved to Bright Flag, where she works now. Bright Flag enables organisations to take control of their legal spends. And what we found out earlier was Sinead was also a member of Foróige back in the day. So you're very welcome, Sinead.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me. Yes, I was a member of the Foróige. So just a little bit about me. I am from Forbán in County Offaly. I was a member of the Foróige team, and also served as I suppose I did some like special initiatives with them over the years, and really enjoyed my time in the group and learnt loads from it. I am the eldest of 5. So opposite to Denise, I was the first one to kind of plough through to college. So yeah, my parents, we were all very new to kind of looking at, you know, CAO and points and all that. And my parents, again, were very supportive of me. And for all 5 of us, we all have really we've gone into different areas. But I think just, you know, talking to people, like one of the top tips I have for you at your stage now is to have conversations with people. It's a wonderful resource. It'll allow you to kind of maybe talk to people and get context around what it means to be a solicitor or an engineer or an architect, whatever it is that you decide to go down. But try and talk to as many people as possible, because it's when you speak to people, you'll get a real understanding of what the day-to-day is in a job. So I went to Forbán secondary school. When I was in TY, a very long time ago, I decided to do work experience in a solicitor's firm in Athlone. So it was called Walker O'Carroll & Hogan. They were really nice people. They used to do some things for my mum and dad. So that's how I just kind of typed up a letter, dropped it into them, and they very kindly let me come in for the week. And I suppose kind of nobody in my family had ever practiced law, or there was no kind of legal background in my family, and we had no connections. So this was the first kind of real entry point for me into what it would be like in a law firm. And I absolutely loved it. I think one of the main reasons why I liked it was the female partner there. I just thought she was an incredibly cool person, really interesting, and just so knowledgeable. I think what I really liked was I sat in on a couple of meetings, and what I really liked was people came in, and she practiced in property, so conveyancing, and they had concerns around, you know, they were worried about land, or they had problems. And by the end of the meeting, you know, she'd given them a clear path forward. She synthesized down kind of the concerns, and she was able to give them, you know, a clear path on what they needed to do in order to kind of resolve their problem. And I think the light bulb moment happened for me there, where I thought, God, I'd love to be in that position where I could help people every day. How, you know, I love talking to people and working through problems. So I think that was what triggered it for me, that law would be a good career path. In terms of, because I'm conscious of the stage that you're at, when I finished TY and moved into 5th year, I loved history, and I loved business studies, and I loved English. So I picked, obviously, you know, those 3 subjects. I also loved music. So me and my family, we were in a family band, and we used to kind of travel around the Midlands playing music every weekend. And part of, you know, what I loved most about that was talking to people. So kind of, I did music as a subject because it was the easiest subject for me to do well in. And I think when you're picking your subjects for your Leaving Cert, obviously look at your requirements, but pick things that you really enjoy if you can, with obviously to the degree possible, because obviously the Leaving Cert is points based, and picking something that you enjoy like music can really help in terms of getting to the point requirement that you need. So with history, business, I also did accountancy. It made sense for me then to select law and accounting as a course that I'd like to pursue. So I got law and accountancy in the University of Limerick. Went down there in 2006, which is a very long time ago. It was a very broad degree, so much like Denise and James, I think this is a great thing to do, is to pick a degree that gives you a broad spectrum. You know, something like a law and accounting or European studies, or, you know, where you've got like a mixture of politics and economics, that's going to give you a broad viewpoint into lots of different things that you could go down. So for me, law and accountancy encompassed, you know, criminal law, which was so interesting. I think everybody likes criminal law because it's nearly like listening to a crime podcast. You know, there's kind of stories about the case, what happened, and then how it was decided. Other law subjects that I really loved in college, I really liked constitutional law. I found it really interesting because you could see the knock-on impact in society, you know, the different things that you were studying. I also really enjoyed contract law and equity. So there was lots of different topics that we covered in college that were really interesting. Full disclosure, when I got to college and started doing the accountancy side of things, I realized that my love of accountancy diminished quite quickly. I'm not very good with numbers, so unfortunately accountancy kind of went by the wayside for me. One area that I really did like was tax. I really liked the topic of tax. So as Denise pointed out, in UL, they give you a really good opportunity to do this thing called co-op. So when I was in 3rd year of college, I did co-op in a firm called Deloitte. So they're not a law firm, they're more like a consultancy, accountancy firm. And I went into the legal team in Deloitte, where I kind of did a lot of tax in relation to, let's say, if somebody was passing on land or passing on, you know, giving a gift, the tax implications that would arise from that. So when you're in UL, and I think a number of other colleges have started to do this, they give you that kind of period of time where you go into a large organization or a small one, you get paid, which is fantastic. You get into the workplace, so you get to like kind of, you know, you're slotted into an office and you're given responsibilities. For me in Deloitte, it was a team of about 30 people, quite similar structure to a law firm in that there were partners, associates. I was like a trainee, so I did a lot of kind of photocopying and a lot of the kind of the smaller tasks, but they were important, and it gave me the opportunity to listen to what was going on. So I learned a lot during that 8-month placement. When I came back from that, I had to make a decision. So when you're doing a broad degree, as you come near the end of it, you do have to kind of make a call as to maybe what path you'd like to go down longer term in terms of the profession. So when I went back in 4th year, this is my route to the law firm, but essentially what happens in universities is companies will come down to the college and they almost sell themselves. There'll be like a career fair day. And how I found the firm that I ultimately did a training contract with, they came down, they did interviews, so you had to go in, you had to interview. I think I did 3 interviews with them over the course of a couple of days. And at the end, they offered me a training contract. So the firm that I trained with is a commercial firm. They're called Matheson. And they have I think maybe they're the largest firm at the moment in Ireland. And they have a really broad range of practice areas. So to give context, let's say Facebook, if they have, some legal queries that they have, as a company, they would go to somebody like Matheson, who have like an employment department. They also have, a banking department. They also have a corporate department, let's say if a Facebook was going to acquire a smaller company. So there's different types of law firms that you can apply to. The path I went down was commercial law. So I wouldn't do any real criminal work at all. I was very much so focused on working for companies. And I think that's an important distinction. As you go through college and even as you go through Blackhall, you learn as you go along what areas are most interesting to you. But for me, in 4th year, I went to the career fair, and Matheson were the one that I was offered a training contract with. It's a little bit off you, but apply to as many as possible, because I got lots of rejections as well. So I think it's important to make as many applications to these different companies as possible. You learn from every interview you do. So it's really good to put your name out there, and even just to sit down and talk to people. It's just a great opportunity to learn from them in the course of the 45 minutes as you're interviewing. Anyway, at the end of my 4th year in UL, I had my contract with Matheson. Also, I should say that UL is a great university. I loved every day that I was down there, because coming from Foróige, a really small town, it was just such a relaxed college. There was not really kind of any pressure around what designer bags you wore or anything like that. It was a really easygoing, chilled out college, and I loved it. It also had a huge kind of open space. It's right down by the Shannon. So enjoyed UL so much. 2 of my best friends I made there, and they actually trained in Matheson with me as well. So some of my best friends, we were in the same course and went into Matheson together. So when you get to the kind of, the end of your college, you've made a decision, yes, I want to go down this career in law. As James talked to, the FE1s, they are certainly a resilience building exercise, to say the least. Definitely the toughest exams I've ever sat, but there is there are techniques that you can develop to help you kind of get through them. So if you get, if you do go down this path, there's actually courses. So, you just pay to do a course. I think there were 2 organizations that did it. They're very good value for what they do. It's like anything, any exam that you do. The first thing is you have to kind of build structure around how are you going to organize yourself, how are you going to study. The same will apply for your Leaving Cert. So what I learned it a little bit through my Leaving Cert. I wish I had learned it more, but I learned it in UL and doing my FE1s. The first thing that you have to do is look at past papers and look at the questions that they ask. What they have in the FE1s is kind of examiner reports. So they'll kind of go through where people maybe made a mistake in the answers years prior. So by kind of looking at that, I devised a technique where I prioritize what I needed to study, and then also take a very structured approach to how I answer questions. And in a nutshell, if you could do that for your FE1s, yes, there's a lot of reading involved, but if you can be structured and kind of disciplined in how you answer the question, that will really stand to you as you do your FE1s. They are hard, but they're not impossible. Lots of people do them and succeed. It's more just, I think, about being organized. So when you sign up to do your FE1s, really they're the entrance into Blackhall. So if you can pass your 8 FE1s, you will get into Blackhall. Blackhall is much more relaxed, and while there is a lot of learning, it's more practical learning. So as James said, with FE1s, it's nearly like the Leaving Cert in that you're kind of learning. It's almost like rote learning. You're learning kind of answers to certain questions. Whereas in Blackhall, you know, you kind of get a much more practical experience as to what it would be like to act as a solicitor. You're given kind of real life examples of, this is a client's problem, how would you advise to solve it? You also actually are brought down to the different courts. So Denise made a really good point earlier. One of the best insights that you'll get is going to the courts and seeing what happens. You'll see the solicitors come with lots of briefs because they've done all the research. You'll also see as well, like, you know, the barristers doing the advocacy in front of the judge, or the solicitors, as is happening more and more now. But it's just a brilliant insight into what actually it means to be a solicitor down in court. So when you're in Blackhall, you do lots of different courses again, or lots of different kind of different areas of law you will look at in parallel. So they break Blackhall into two different parts. So because I was with Matheson, I think I went up to Matheson, did about 4 months in the office. Then I did a 6-month stint in Blackhall. Then I went back to Matheson for another maybe year, then went to Blackhall again. So they break it up around your training contract. Most training contracts are about 3 years in length, and that's a mixture of Blackhall and then working in the office. As I said, Matheson is a commercial law firm, so the way that they structure it, there was 30 people in my intake, so I was one of 30. We were broken into different departments within the law firm. So for example, you could do banking, or you could do, there was some conveyancing, so you'd work in the property department for 6 months. You got to kind of see the different areas of the law firm. And that was really good because it allowed you to get a sense of kind of what you would like to ultimately specialize in as a solicitor. So after the 2 years there, I decided to specialize in commercial litigation and corporate restructuring. What that meant really was, it was a mixture of going down to court. So there was one particular case I worked on for over 9 months, and it was really kind of, I would say, when you're working, particularly as a trainee solicitor, one of the things I absolutely loved about it was that you got like so much exposure. Like James said, you go in and there's no kind of typical day, and sometimes you felt a bit overwhelmed because you'd nearly come out of a meeting with more questions than answers. But what I loved was working with other solicitors. You know, you learn from people who are more experienced than you. You learn both the law, but you also learn how they approach problems. You learn about structure, how you structure your day, how you structure your answers to your clients. So as you're training, you're really given a good opportunity, no matter what firm you're in, to learn from others, because that's how solicitors kind of develop, is through working with others and kind of seeing how people ahead of them deal with certain problems. So when I was in Matheson, when I qualified and spent about 3 years, it was a mixture of going down to court, and your days could be quite long. I think probably, Denise, you would agree with this. Sometimes when you're in court, you know, your day might start at 8 a.m. You're down in court for most of the day, but because you might be in court again the next day, it means that you're working, you know, maybe in the evening to kind of prepare. But it's kind of like how I would describe my experience working as a solicitor. There's kind of peaks and troughs. You know, you might be in court for a week and it's really busy, but then you'll have some downtime to kind of relax again. So that's one thing that I experienced, is that you will be very busy at times, but then there'll be other times, let's say if the courts are closed, where you're a little bit quieter. The other thing that I really liked about, you know, kind of working in the commercial litigation space was that we were working with companies where, I suppose, like, you got to kind of learn about the company and why are they coming to you? Like, ultimately, as a solicitor, you're there to help people with their problems. And what I probably, not that I love people's problems, or that I like people coming to me with problems, but, you know, it was when you helped them solve a problem. That was the most rewarding thing for me. I loved when, you know, we were working on a case and you could see that, you know, they got some form of resolution from it, or indeed if that kind of it's settled out of court, that there was some resolution there for the client. I think that was probably the most rewarding thing for me. I also think in terms of skills, like an important skills to have, you have to be a good communicator. As I said, people are coming to you sometimes when they really need help. So you need to be able to understand and listen to what they're saying, try and kind of stand in their shoes almost for a second to try and understand what they're experiencing, and then you need to come up with advice that will help them through their problem. So listening to them and then communicating clearly to them the strategy that you're going to employ to help them get out of that position. I think that's probably one of the most important skills to have. I think you also need to be curious. Somebody had a question in about learning. It's just a continued, you're always going to be learning. The law changes all the time. There's loopholes, which is one of the most important things that you can do as a solicitor, is help tap into that. So you're always going to be learning as well. And I think you need to be curious about new things. You also need to be resilient, because there can be really tough days as a solicitor. There can be really long days. You can work quite hard. So that resilience is really important. And then I think you should be the type of person that is solution driven. Ultimately, people come to you looking for a solution. So I think being solution focused really helps, and good attention to detail as well is another important one. So when I worked in Matheson, I spent most of my time in court and really enjoyed it. Then little bit of a kind of a curveball in that after 3 years working in Matheson, I joined a technology company. So I joined a startup. Somebody a couple of years ahead of me in Matheson, developed this software with an engineer. It was just the two of them in a back room, and they kind of were basically fusing, their understanding of the law and how the legal industry works with their understanding of technology, and in particular AI. And I suppose for me, after 3 years working in Matheson, being a solicitor is a really great career. It's very structured, and it's great. Once you get a training contract, you're kind of on a very clear path in terms of, you move through, like Denise now as a partner. That's kind of the end goal, let's say, for somebody who's practicing law in a law firm. For me, I couldn't really see myself moving up those ranks, let's say, within a law firm. I kind of wanted to get into a business and to kind of, I suppose, experience what it's like to be embedded in a business, as opposed to just helping lots of different businesses with their problems. So I left Matheson to work in this technology startup. And it's not super related to law, so I won't go into it too much, but basically we're using technology to help lawyers, in-house lawyers, to better understand the work that law firms are doing for them. But to bring it back to like why I'm speaking here tonight, I think one of the reasons why I really enjoy working in this startup, and why having a law degree and legal experience has really stood to me, is because when you train as a lawyer and when you work as a lawyer in a law firm, you actually will start to get a really broad understanding of, the business dynamic that happens within companies, because you're helping them with their problems. So for me, going into Bright Flag, it was really useful for me to be able to take the skills I'd learned from training as a lawyer and apply them into Bright Flag. So I've been with Bright Flag now for 5 years. We've grown from 5 when I joined to 200 people now. I've spent some time in Sydney. I also travel quite a bit to New York. What I've learned is that when you when you study law, it opens up so many opportunities for you. So it's really important. Like, let's say if you're thinking about studying law, brilliant. I strongly suggest it. It's a really rewarding career. It's a really good degree to study, because I think you learn a lot about like how things work, like kind of so many things in society come back to the law and how things are structured. So if you study law, it's going to give you a brilliant grounding no matter what you do. And what I've learned since being in Bright Flag is that actually, there's so many opportunities out there for people. Like where you are at your stage now, you're thinking about the career that you want to go down. If you, like in the best possible way, and I know I had this said to me and I didn't listen to it, but try not to kind of just have tunnel vision. Whatever you pick in your degree, so long as you enjoy it and you work hard, things will open up for you in, the kind of the weirdest ways sometimes. So my tips are kind of work hard and be structured in terms of, how you approach your Leaving Cert, how you approach your college degree. If you do go down the legal path, it's a really good path to go down. You'll meet, my best friends I've met through studying and working in a law firm. You will learn a lot, and it will open up the doors to you in so many different areas. If you had said to me in 2010 or 2011 that I'd work in a tech startup. I never would have thought that that would be possible or something that I'd want to do. But it's worked out quite well for me. I'm enjoying my work now. And I think a lot of that is because the degree I picked, and being a lawyer, it's a really good broad understanding of lots of different things that can really add value no matter what role you ultimately go down. In terms of just, I suppose, advice, what I've learned is be curious, ask questions of people. Like these forums here, they're brilliant to just get an opportunity to ask questions of people. How do you like it? Also, what's really stood to me is mentorship. Having a good mentor wherever you work. Like, and I mean that, you know, when I worked during the summers when I was in college, I used to work in DPD customer services. And there was this woman who was a couple of years, like she'd been there a couple of years, and she helped me so much in terms of understanding like why people were freaking out when they couldn't find their parcels. She was my mentor in DPD. Equally, when I got into a law firm, I was just really lucky. The first person that I was a trainee for, she was a really, really good partner within Matheson. And we still keep in contact. She still helps me, you know, when I have difficult things that I need to work out in my career. So as you're going along, try and kind of identify someone who you respect, that you look up to, and that who, you know, you can build that relationship with to get good advice. And then finally, I think that, you know, where the stage that you're at, just try and have an open, broad mind. I strongly suggest or recommend a good broad degree. It'll kind of like law and accountancy, European studies, economics and politics, those types of things are really good because it'll give you a good taste early on as to what you might like to go down in terms of a path. Sorry, Bernie, I'm conscious now that probably out of time.
No, you actually just answered one of the questions I was about to ask you in relation to, you know, that broad degree. You would recommend that people just don't box themselves into, like, say, law, that maybe they add something else on to it.
I personally think, and just from my friends as well, who I trained with, I think having that broad degree is a really good approach. And one other top tip for me, I didn't have the luxury of it, to be honest. I wasn't as well informed as I should have been in college. I didn't know about internships until I was in final year, which was not good. But if you get into college, you do law or whatever degree, try and do internships, because they're a wonderful way for you to get in for 4 weeks and see what an office is like, see what a practice area is like, you know, without kind of maybe having to commit to a training contract or something like that.
Okay, there's a few different people have asked here about, you know, if you study law in Ireland, can you work abroad with it? Or are you because law is obviously different in every country.
No, that is... Yeah, that's a bit of a sticking point, to be honest. To be totally honest, I know within Ireland and the UK, but who knows, I'm not sure how Brexit impacts that. But when I did my Blackhall exams, I did do an extra exam, which allowed me then to be recognised as a solicitor in the UK. But I do know that I have friends who went to the US and went to Australia, and they had to do conversion exams. So for most jurisdictions, you will have to do a conversion exam, and within the US, you know, it's actually by state. So that is something to bear in mind. The UK, I think it is reciprocal. You can, if you're qualified in the Republic, I think they do recognise that in the UK.
Okay, great. And I'm just working through here. So a few others have asked about the working hours, and I think Denise mentioned that there'll be long days and then there's other days, but you know, like any role, maybe there are no set working hours.
No, like, to be totally honest, when I was in Matheson anyway, I did work really long hours at times, and part of the reason why I moved was because I wanted the better work-life balance. I love yoga as well and do a lot of that, so I wanted to make time for that, but I ended up working probably more hours in the job I'm in now. So I think that it depends on your personality too, but yeah, you will work long hours, but I guess it comes down to kind of, another tip I've learned over the years is just having boundaries and being able to say no and not being afraid to say no. That's really important too, because ultimately, if you keep saying yes to working, you'll keep getting the work. So no matter what career you go into, if you can try and kind of draw a healthy boundary, that will stand to you. Something I haven't been very good at, but hopefully the younger generations are better at it.
Okay, Sinead, thanks so much for that. We're just going to maybe go back to the full panel now, and just there's a couple of questions I've just taken note of here that you may be all or able to answer. A couple of people asked around jobs. If you do law, are there jobs you can do that's not a solicitor or a barrister related, or if say you go down the route of a law degree, are you boxing yourself into something? Any of you want to answer that?
I can talk to that because I have moved out of the career, and I have, you know, like I am not practicing as a lawyer anymore, but everything I learned has really stood to me. I think that there's a huge opportunity in technology companies, is what I've seen anyway from my colleagues. I have a number of friends who work in Google, Facebook, Stripe. They went in with, you know, having practiced as a solicitor for a number of years, but now they're actually more on the business side. So absolutely not. It's a wonderful kind of baseline, but there's lots of different things that you can do off the back of it.
Okay, great. As well, another one that has come in again here is, how do you know if law is for you? Like, is there anything, maybe Janice, you might tell us that, you know, you've had a long career, you know, how do you know now, say to your 16-year-old self, how would you know if law is for you?
I don't think my 16, 17, 18, 20 something year old self would have been able to answer that question. I feel personally that it's a career that I've kind of grown into. I found a kind of a niche area that sort of suits me, and that I like practicing within. But it's very hard for young people, particularly if you're still of school going age and you're trying to choose a course and so on. It's very hard for you to fully understand maybe what the course content is going to be like, or what the curriculum of a course is going to be like. And one of the things I found helpful, my daughter started college in September. Now, she's not doing law. She's doing an engineering degree, but we looked at different versions of the degree you could do in different universities, and we looked at the different modules or classes within it. And I think you need to drill into that level of detail when you're choosing a course. And if you have access to a good you know, career guidance counselor, they will probably be able to help you do that. There is part of me, though, that thinks that regardless of what course you choose to do, whether it's engineering, science, law, whatever, you really won't have a true sense of it until you're in the middle of it, because it's just impossible. I think a lot of young people convince themselves that they're going to love law, and I'm almost more worried about people who are certain about it. Because often it doesn't live up to expectations, or you end up learning about things that you didn't really realize were part of the course. So drill into the modules if you're looking at courses, and try and figure out, is this something I might find interesting? I think if something piques your interest, if you like more modules than dislike, there's always going to be one or two you're going to hate. There's no point, I'm sure Sinead and James will agree with me. There were, you know, classes during college that I didn't look forward to, that I knew I wasn't very good at. And sometimes you just have to battle with those subjects, try to pass the exams, and then hopefully, you know, show that you're good at the other ones, the ones that really interest you. I think if you're interested enough in something, you'll always find a way to be good at it. But do drill into the modules and have a good sense of what the course is going to be like. Don't be taken by surprise, you know, when you discover that, you know, there are subjects in there that you don't like or that don't suit you. And I would agree with Sinead. Look at the degrees that allow you to open up a second option: law and business, law and accountancy, law and maybe a language, so that you have a good balance of subjects in your degree course. Lots of people choose to do a BCL, a pure law degree, and if that works for you, go for it. But if you're anyway a little bit hesitant, broaden your options. That would be my advice.
Okay. You know, this through all the different career events we've had, we've asked this question of our panelists. Would you recommend for the young people to get out there and get work experience? I know at the minute it's very hard for them with COVID-19, but just James, just from your point of view, would you recommend that you do work experience in a solicitor's office and just get a feel for what it's like?
I would, yeah. I think working anywhere in general, dealing with people face to face, having responsibilities, and just overcoming different challenges is very beneficial. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a law setting, but as long as you become comfortable dealing with people, I think is probably the number one most important aspect. I'd stress.
I suppose your job involves a lot of communication and, you know, talking to people, and probably that's maybe something that the young people should find out that they're good at. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Sorry, Bernie, just on the last point, just for the kids who might, they were asking about doing a converted course or a course with different aspects to law. The people, you should understand that to become a solicitor and to do the FE1s, the next level exams, you need a level 8 degree, but it doesn't have to be law. It can be anything. It can be engineering, culinary arts, teaching, whatever. Just so people are aware that if they don't select the law-based subject under CEO, you're not excluding yourself from becoming a solicitor.
Oh, right. Well, that's great. Thanks a million for that, James. So, you know, it may be something that you fall into later on. It's just passing those exams. So just before we finish, guys, because I'm conscious that we're nearly at 9 o'clock, what would be one piece of advice each of you would give to a young person right now who is thinking of studying law and planning to become a solicitor? We start off maybe with Sinead. I'll put you on the spot.
Thanks. No worries. I suppose I started last. My piece of advice to young people thinking of studying law, I think my piece of advice for you, if you're thinking of it, is to get out there as best you can. Speak to solicitors. Somebody asked, what would you do in work experience? You won't be doing really heavy lifting of legal work in your week of experience, but learn and observe, see what the people are doing. You'll get a really good insight if you can listen in as to what it might involve for you. And then longer term, if you decide to go down it, just have a broad mind, trust your gut, and like things will work out the way things will work out in the best way possible. Even through college, sometimes the best thing is going off on a random tangent. You'll land in where you're meant to be. So trust the process and have a broad mind.
Great. James, what would be your piece of advice?
To persevere when you might find exams tough or you're leaving cert or whatever. Just baby steps and you get there, and the reward is definitely worth the work at the end of it if you're struggling.
Yeah. Thanks a million. And finally, Denise.
James mentioned a word that I really like, and that's perseverance. You know, stick with something, but at the same time, I guess don't stick with it if it's really not suiting you. In comparison to when I started out doing my degree, there's so many options available to young people in terms of the courses they can choose and the career paths they can follow. There are jobs out there now that didn't exist when I was qualifying. There will be jobs there for you that don't exist now. So don't limit yourself, and don't be panicking about sort of putting yourself into a pigeonhole and saying, I want to do law, I must do a law degree, I must then do Blackhall or King's Inns. You know, give yourself a little bit of flexibility. Don't panic, even if you want to take a year out. One of my biggest regrets, I never took a year out. All the way through, finished my leaving cert, started my degree, finished my degree, started an apprenticeship. I would love to have taken a year out and travelled. And I think it's a great learning experience. And if you get the chance to do it, it'll all be here waiting for you when you come back.
I second that completely. I too was in that position, and I would give my right arm to go back. You know, you think when you're 21, you need to get on this track, go and enjoy your free time. It's precious. That's really good.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thanks a million, guys, for that. Just before I hand you back to Jimmy, who'll sum up, I'm just going to launch the poll. So for the young people here, we just like to get a little bit of feedback. So while Jim is summing up, I'm going to launch the poll. So if you just want to answer those 3 very quick questions, and I'll pass you back to Jim.
On behalf of Foróige, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We hope it was beneficial and that you have gained some insight into a career in law. For those of you who would like to be involved in Foróige or that would like to learn more about our programs and how they can benefit you, you will receive an email with all the information you need in the coming days. I want to sincerely thank our panelists who have so generously given their time and shared such valuable advice. Without our incredible panelists, none of these career webinars would be possible. Foróige is hosting more career webinars throughout the month of May, and you are welcome to attend if you wish. You can still register through Eventbrite. So the poll is there going, so we'd really appreciate as many of you as possible to fill in the poll. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to log on tonight. And again, good night.